YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Come on in, you guys. Make yourselves at home. Just getting the last second little things done here as I always do. So let me grab the headline to put over on Instagram. Hope you guys are having a great day today. It is always busy around the Moore household during the week. I just go all week long. All right, so we're gonna put this on Instagram. I usually just do this ahead of time, and I thought, let me just do it on the air with you guys. I'm just jibber jabbering to you. Hello, Norma. How you doing today? So we'll see how this goes. But guys, I have a really cool show in store for you here today because I have been gathering a lot of research lately, and sometimes when I do research, oh, it's blurry on the screen. I need to clean the... See, I'm showing you in real time how we do this show. I've been gathering a lot of research lately, and it's just been coming in lightning speed. And sometimes it's studies that don't really need a whole lot of talking about, and then others I do a whole show about. So sometimes I will feature them on my Friday Ask Me Anything. So when I am at the beginning, I'll feature some of these smaller ones that I don't want to do a whole Jimmy rants on, but I definitely want to mention. Well, they've been gathering. I've got a ton of them. Hello, Audra. Ton of these studies that have come out this year that have just been like sitting. So, I mean, most of them recently, so it's not like they've been sitting for months upon months, but a lot of really good studies. So I thought, let's just do a roundup of some of these studies that have come in this year. So I've got 10 of them to get through. So if I do 6 minutes per, 5 or 6 minutes per, that's an hour show, which includes, I'm basically just going to read the abstract. I'm not going to get into details on any of them. Happy Taco Cat Tuesday. Thank you, Abel. Taco Cat Tuesday? I have a kitty cat. Come here, Skunky. Abel wants to make you into taco meat. I've had cow tongue before. I don't know what cat would taste like though. Or maybe I have inadvertently at a Chinese restaurant. Just kidding. You're getting me in trouble early, Abel. Don't do that. Don't do that. I can make my own trouble. I don't need someone rabble-rousing me. But yes, just dressing your cat up like a taco works. Interesting. Is that really a thing, Abel? Cat Taco Tuesday. I haven't heard that before. Anywho, so yes, I have lots of research. It is really a thing, he says. Okay, interesting. If you say so, and if the great Abel James says so, then it must be so. Also, it's a palindrome. Oh, I knew there was something in there. I knew there was something funky about that. Good old palindromes. If you don't know what a palindrome is, Google it. It's funny. All right, so yes, I have 10 research papers to get through here today. So gonna be a fun show. Thank you guys for being here today. I am winding down. I've got 3 weeks left and then I'm going away for at least 2 months. So November, December, I'm definitely going to be off completely, and it's gonna be just like my sabbatical was last year. I'm not just leaving my work. I'm not going to be checking any emails, which I really haven't done much this year anyway. Not going to post on social media, not really going to look at anything. I'm just totally going to veg out. I need that space in order to decompress. This has been a very challenging year for me, both personally and professionally. So we'll come back strong in 2021. When, I don't know, but I will eventually be back. But 3 more weeks. So I'm already in that contemplative mode. If you've been reading my posts lately on social media, I've gotten a lot more introspective, reflective. Go read my posts here these last few weeks because I'm trying to encourage you, give you a new way of thinking about things. That's just my jam. All right, let's get this show on the road. If you're ready, I'm ready. We're gonna pop over here now to Instagram and get this show started. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. I've got 10, count them, 10 research papers to tell you about here today. We're going to touch on them here today from the nutritional health realm. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It'll take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. You got to go follow me, though. I'm over on Instagram. I am at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so thank you so much for being here today. We also go live over on my Facebook page. We simulcast over here where Shannon just popped in her head to say hello. Thank you guys for being here. We also go live over on YouTube where Shirley just came in. Lots of people coming in to watch today's episode of Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay right here on Instagram. It's on IGTV. Right as soon as this is over, we pop it right up to IGTV for you to enjoy. If you miss it there, you can also watch the replay over on YouTube. Just type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. Finally, you guys, check it out. Or before finally, on Tuesdays, we always air a best of Jimmy Rants episode on my flagship podcast, The Living La Vida Low Carb Show. So that's at llvlc.com. So go check that out. Always one of the better episodes that we've done over the past week. I probably break down the study or something. I forget what today's is about, but go check it out, llvlc.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And now finally, pop on over to the official website for this show. It is jimmyrants.com. While you're there, you can see all the past episodes, over 600 and counting now. And you can also show your support either through a PayPal or Patreon link, and a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. Okay, you guys, I have a very special treat in store for you today because you guys know how I love to nerd out on studies. There's a lot of times I'll come on here with a whole study, something about nutritional health, fasting, exercise, all kinds of different studies I've featured here on Jimmy Rants. And I could give it the whole shebang treatment for 1 hour, waxing eloquently about all the good, bad, and ugly of any study. Well, as you know, I keep my ear to the ground of all the research that comes out, and there's a lot of it that has been happening in 2020. And so sometimes those studies kind of get pushed to the back burner, pushed to the back burner, pushed to the back burner. And not all studies warrant having an entire episode just to it. So I thought, okay, how about I take some of those back burner ones and compile them and do an entire health research round. So I've got them for you guys. I have 10 studies that have come out in 2020, and it's all about, there's several of them in there about diet, about fasting, about exercise. So we're gonna just like nerd out on science. Now, hold on to your hats because we're gonna have to go rapid fire here. There's 10 studies. I did the math. If I do 5 to 6 minutes per study, that's an hour right there. So I need to read the abstract, which that's pretty much all we'll do is just read the abstract. But that's more than most of your medical doctors end up doing. So that will be fun to go through this. That way you can kind of get an idea of what some of the research is out there. I try to keep you on the cutting edge, and if you wanted cutting edge, you're getting it here today on Jimmy Rants. You guys ready? Let's look at the first study. This study was published in a journal called Lipids in Health and Disease, and it was just published a couple of days ago, like October 8th, 9th, whatever it was. It was in the journal, like I said, Lipids in Health and Disease. The title of the paper, Effect of Intermittent versus Continuous Calorie Restriction on Body Weight and Cardiometabolic Risk Markers in Subjects with Overweight or Obesity and Mild to Moderate Hypertriglyceridemia. So that's high triglycerides. It was a randomized trial, and they basically wanted to look at intermittent calorie restriction as a novel method of body weight control with also the ability to improve all those obesity-related cardiometabolic markers. The impact of this diet on subjects with high triglycerides was unknown, so they wanted to test that in this study. They had a total of 88 subjects who were overweight or obese. mild to moderate high triglycerides level, and then they were randomized to continuous calorie restriction. In other words, they just cut their calories nonstop, or a very low calorie diet for 3 days of the week for 8 weeks. So there was 44 patients in each of the groups. Body composition, cholesterol levels, glucose, insulin, adiponectin, liver enzymes, all were measured at baseline and then at the end of the 8 weeks. An intention to treat analysis was performed. So let's see how they did. The body weight decreased in both groups, no significant difference. There was no significant difference between the two groups in the reduced amount of fat mass, free fat mass, or fat-free mass, and waist circumference. Both groups got a significant reduction in their plasma, that's their blood, triglycerides after 8 weeks, with no difference between the groups. HOMA-IR, which I did a Jimmy Rants on the other day, improved significantly in those who did the intermittent calorie restriction compared to the continuous. Glucose, insulin, LDL, HDL, liver enzymes, adiponectin, not different between the two groups. So their conclusion is the result of this short-term study suggests that 3 days a week of doing intermittent calorie restriction as compared to continuous calorie restriction for the reduction of triglycerides in patients with high triglycerides and in the short term appears to be more effective than continuous dieting for improving insulin resistance. However, long-term studies need to be found. Great study, but I think it's incomplete. When we see these kinds of studies on calorie restriction, I always want to know, what did they actually eat? Because you and I both know calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. That's what they want you to believe, that, well, it's all about calories. Now, that's not to say that calories don't have a place in this, but I think 500 calories of a ribeye steak is far different than 500 calories of candy and ice cream and Coca-Cola. I think we would all agree with that. And so if you only predicate it on reducing calories, where did the reduction come from? Did it get reduced in the junk food? Did it get reduced in protein, which would be a very bad idea? Protein's like the main thing you should focus on with the healthy fats that come along with it while minimizing processed foods. You do that, you're gonna be pretty healthy most of the time, including in your triglycerides. And we know from a lot of other studies that the best way to lower triglycerides, there's no drug that does it better than carbohydrate restriction. And so I say the reason they got a benefit in this study in both groups, they got a benefit in a lowering of the triglycerides. The intermittent calorie restriction, they lowered it by 15.6%. So if your total triglycerides was 200, that was 30 points. That's not bad. And then the continuous calorie restriction was lowered by 6.3%. 6.3%. So that would be lowered it by 12 points. Okay? What if they also carbohydrate restricted? They would have seen a much more significant drop, even in 8 weeks. I've seen in 6 weeks, triglycerides near 300 get down to 120. I've seen it in all kinds of people. And all it takes is just a deliberate attempt to carbohydrate restrict, because those triglycerides primarily are going up because of the carbs you're eating and not just the calories, generically the calories. So I think the benefit they got in this study with both groups in the triglycerides had more to do with the carbohydrate restriction. And keep in mind, they intermittently calorie restricted, which means they did other things on the days they weren't calorie restricting. That probably, fasting and things like that, helped to bring down that as well. So hopefully that explains that study a little bit for you, but it's interesting. It just goes to give you another little clue as to why triglycerides can go down. But let's get to the next one. If you're joined us late, I am doing something unique I've never done on Jimmy Rants before. I've got a crap ton of studies to get through. It's a health research roundup here today, really rapid fire review of 10 key studies that have come out in 2020 that I haven't had a chance to get to, so we're getting to them today. So this next one was published in BMJ, British Medical Journal. And the title of it, Carbohydrate Last Meal Pattern Lowers Postprandial Glucose and Insulin Excursions in Type 2 Diabetes. So they wanted to test whether the timing of carbohydrate ingestion during a meal would impact your after meal blood sugars. That's an interesting study, especially on those who have type 2 diabetes, because you would think it would be an exaggerated response. So let's take a look. 16 subjects that have type 2 diabetes consume the exact same meal on 3 days in random order. Carbohydrate first, followed 10 minutes later by protein and vegetables. Then the next meal, or the next day, protein and vegetables first, followed by 10 minutes later by the carbohydrate, or they just mixed it all together. Blood was sampled for glucose, insulin, this thing called GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, glucagon measurements at baseline just before meal ingestion, and then subsequently at 30-minute intervals up to 180 minutes. So they did a 3-hour postprandial glucagon measurements, as well as glucose, insulin, and GLP-1. All right, so what happened? The incremental areas under the curve for glucose and incremental glucose peaks were 53 and 54% lower respectively when carbohydrate was consumed last, compared with carbohydrate consumed first, where there was 44% and 40% lower respectively compared with all the components then done together. Postprandial insulin was lower, as well as the GLP-1 excursions higher following the carbohydrate last meal compared with carbohydrate first. So the theory there is if you eat the carbohydrate and then you blunt the effects of the carbohydrate with fat and protein, or in this case, protein and vegetables, then you can prevent your postprandial glucose and insulin and glucagon levels from going haywire. That was, I guess, the theory. So they concluded that the carbohydrate last meal pattern may be an effective, or I had those inverted. When you eat the carbohydrate first, you don't blunt, but when you have food in the system, then you eat the carbs, it does blunt, sorry. May be an effective behavioral strategy to improve your postprandial glycemia. So meal order, it seems to matter at least a little bit. And I would say if you added fat, which they did not mention in this study at all, they just talked about protein with vegetables and then carbohydrate. They didn't mention anything about fat. Fat would also blunt the effect. So I assume you would get an even more profound effect if you consumed fat and protein first and then added carbohydrate. So I guess the moral of this story is if you're gonna eat carbohydrate in a meal, eat it last, not first. That's that study. All right. We are rolling, you guys. Let's get to the third study. This one here was published in Lipids and Health and Disease. And it looks like it was a couple weeks ago. This came out. Oh wait, it's the exact same study I just read to you. So oops, we have 9. I was so excited that I found a study that I found it twice. So this one, you guys, we're just gonna throw it out the window. Make it 9. Okay, let's get to the next one. So this is a new story, and it has some interesting information in there about exercise. It doesn't look like this one was a study. My apologies for this. I thought this one was a study. It's just a story. It's based on some research, but I don't want to flaw it up. So we're going to set that to the side. We will go to an actual study next. How's this for live television? You guys like watching live, so let's go to the next real study. We're down to 8 now, so by the time we're done, hopefully we have some semblance of 6, 7, or 8. I'm looking at the rest of them. They all look like studies from now on. So this one was published in the journal Nutrients. Yes, I have fun in life. The title of this one or actually it was published October 3rd, by the way. The title of this one, an almond-based low carbohydrate diet improves depression and glycometabolism in patients with type 2 diabetes through modulating the gut microbiota and GLP-1. It's a randomized controlled trial. So what they wanted to look at was a low carb diet is more beneficial for the glycometabolism for people with type 2 diabetes and may be effective in reducing depression. Almond, which is a common nut, has been shown to effectively improve hyperglycemia, high blood pressure or high blood sugar, and depression. So that's interesting. This study aimed to determine the effect of an almond-based low-carb diet on depression and glycometabolism, as well as gut microbiota and fasting glucagon peptide 1, that GLP-1 we were just talking about, in patients with type 2 diabetes. It's interesting they chose almonds. Almonds have a lot of omega-6 fats, so that's interesting that they would want to use almonds. It was one of the criticisms when people started making almond flour desserts and had almond this, almond that. People are like, oh my gosh, you're getting an overload of almonds. And there's also some lectins in there. I mean, it's all kinds of things that you got to be careful of over consuming almonds. But they made it an almond-based low-carb diet. Maybe they weren't thinking about those ramifications and only the things they were looking at. So it was a randomized controlled trial which compared an almond-based low-carb diet with a low-fat diet. They had 45 participants with type 2 diabetes, all of them at a diabetes club and the endocrine division of the first and second affiliated hospital at Suzhou University in China. Between December 2018 and December 2019, they completed each dietary intervention for 3 months, including 22 of them in the almond low-carb diet group and 23 in the low-fat diet group. Indicators for depression and biochemical indicators included their A1C levels, which is a key blood sugar marker, their gut microbiome, so they tested that probably through their stool, maybe through a blood sample. They have different ways of testing that. And GLP-1 concentration. They did that at baseline, at 3 months, and then they compared the two groups. So what were the results? The almond low-carb diet significantly improved depression and their A1C levels. Meanwhile, the almond low-carb diet significantly increased their short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria, Rosburgia, Ruminococcus, and U bacteria. The GLP-1 concentration in those who ate the almond low-carb diet was higher than that of the low-fat diet, so they concluded in the study, we speculate that the role of an almond low-carb diet is improving depression in those who have type 2 diabetes, and that it may be associated with the growth of that bacteria in the microbiome, increasing the short-chain fatty acids and the GPR43 activation, further maintaining that GLP-1 secretion. So in future studies, they want to take a look at this a little further to see what the mechanism is. So people dealing with depression, people wanting to kind of deal with that happen to have type 2 diabetes. I will make this point. It's not an accident that a lot of people who deal with depression also deal with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Depression is one of those things that is a sign of a dysregulation in blood sugar and insulin levels. And so the brain actually, and we've talked about this a lot of times, the brain actually needs fat to be fueled properly because you have 70% fat in your brain. So when you restrict fat, which they did on a low-fat diet here as the comparison, or then you replace those fats or replace that no fat with like healthy fats like coming from almonds or animal foods and that kind of thing, you're going to see an improvement. The interesting part of this study, you guys, was where they looked at the microbiome, and it was the microbiome that improved, that they're theorizing might have helped. Now we know the biome has a huge role in our health. We don't really know the full extent of what that role is. We just know it does play a really big role. And so, again, another fascinating study looking at getting healthy fats, in the context of a low-carb diet for glycemic control and depression for those who have type 2 diabetes. Pretty cool, huh? Once again, if you joined us late, we are doing a health research roundup here today on Jimmy Rants. It's a rapid fire of, well, it was going to be 10 studies, but it's now down to 8. So I repeated one, and one of them was just a news story that I thought was a study, and it actually was not a study. So we're down to 8, but I hope you're enjoying this today. I'm enjoying making a fool of myself sometimes. So. All right, so let's get to another study that looks at the microbiome. This is really interesting. This was published on October 6th in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism. The title of the study, Intermittent Fasting Improves Cardiometabolic Risk Factors and Gut Microbiota in Metabolic Syndrome Patients. So this is out of China as well. All the good research lately in nutritional health coming out of China. What's up with that? So intermittent fasting is an effective strategy to improve cardiometabolic health. So what they did was they examined the effects of intermittent fasting on these risk factors for cardiometabolic health, as well as the gut microbiome in patients who have metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is just another term for insulin resistance and dysregulation in all those metabolic markers. So it was a randomized clinical trial. They looked at adults with metabolic syndrome between the ages of 30 and 50. It was 8 weeks of 2-day modified intermittent fasting. So the cardiometabolic risk factors included body composition, oxidative stress, inflammatory cytokines, endothelial function. All of these things were assessed at the beginning and end of the 8-week study. They were looking for the diversity, composition, and functional pathways of the gut microbiota, as well as circulating gut-derived metabolites, all measured. So who did they look at? 39 patients, 21 in the intermittent fasting group, 18 of them in the control group. On the fasting days, participants in the IF group reduced 69% of the caloric intake compared to non-fasting days. So they didn't fully fast. It's interesting how they call it a fasting, but it's intermittent fasting. So I guess technically, if you reduced your calories by 69%, but see, if you're doing a good intermittent fast, you're making sure you're getting your calories in. It's not just a pure calorie reduction that you're doing with intermittent fasting. So this is interesting that they reduced their amount of calories on the fasting days by 69% compared to non-fasting days. So that means if they had 2,000 calories on a non-fasting day, let's round it to 70%. So 70 of, that's 1,400 less calories. So what, 600 calories on the days they intermittent fast? So they have one small meal on the day they intermittent fast. That's not how you intermittent fast. They don't ever ask anybody that knows something about fasting. Anyway, keep that in mind as we go through this. The 8-week IF significantly reduced fat mass. Yeah, if you starve yourself, you are going to reduce fat mass. Oxidative stress, inflammatory cytokines, and improved the vasodilatory parameters. Furthermore, IF induced significant changes in the gut microbiome, increased the production of short-chain fatty acids, and decreased lipopolysaccharides. So that's sugar that's in the lipoproteins. Gut microbiota alteration attributed to the intermittent fasting was significantly associated with cardiovascular risk factors and resulted in distinct genetic shifts of carbohydrate metabolism in the gut community. So if you're not eating as many carbohydrates because you're fasting, that would shift that population. So they conclude in the study that intermittent fasting induces a significant alteration of the gut microbiome and functional pathways in a manner which is closely associated with mitigation of cardiometabolic risk factors. In other words, it improves cardiometabolic health, which is all those kind of cholesterol, blood sugar, insulin, inflammation markers, the whole shebang. The study provides potential mechanistic insights into the prevention of adverse outcomes associated with metabolic syndrome. So, great study. Little bit fluky. On the days that they intermittent fast, they're getting 69% less calories. they're either gorging themselves on the days that they're eating, or they somehow think they need to starve themselves on the day they're fasting. Why not do it like a normal fasting period would be? If you intermittent fast, those of you that intermittent fast, even if you intermittent fast for 18 hours, you're still eating within a 6-hour window. You don't have to just limit your calories in that eating meal. In fact, when we wrote the book, The Complete Guide to Fasting, we literally said in there, when you're not eating, don't eat. But when you're eating, make sure you eat. So when you fast, fast. When you feast, feast. Don't go half-assed on either one of them. Well, I'll just have a few calories while I'm fasting. No, that doesn't work. Or I'll just have just a little bit of calories on my feeding meals because I don't want to overdo it. No, when you eat, eat to satiety and have enough calories. This is where people make such a big mistake. When they try to fast, they try to cheat it by having some calories, and then the inverse. When they're trying to eat, well, I don't want to eat too much, so I don't need enough, and your body never gets the full benefits of the fasting. All right, so let's get to the next one. This was a study published in the journal Diabetes Care. White rice consumption linked to increased diabetes risk in a 21-country study. Consuming white rice can increase your risk of developing diabetes according to a decade-long research over 21 nations. It highlights that South Asians consume the highest amount of rice in their diet, and they are at the highest risk of developing diabetes. A lot of people are like, well, what about all the Asian countries that they're healthy as an ox and yet they eat lots of rice? Now we have a study that shows they are getting type 2 diabetes. Carbohydrates such as rice will make up 70 to 75% of South Asians' total diet. On average, a rural Indian eats 6 kilos of rice per month. An urban Indian eats around 4.5 kilos per month. Researchers write that after the 1970s, processed white rice replaced the traditional hand-pulled rice as a major part of the Indian diet. To create white rice, the grains are polished post the removal of the husk, bran, and germ layers, and this alters the grain's appearance, texture, and stores longevity, but also strips important nutrients like vitamin D and thiamine. I would argue, too, that that is a very highly processed process that it goes through, and that increases the glycemic impact. In other words, it pushes your blood sugar and insulin levels, much more so than the traditional forms that they used to eat. Without having the vitamin D and thiamine that's been stripped, white rice can become a simple carbohydrate, just like sugar, that the body can digest rapidly. Have you ever had just a starch in your mouth? Starch is not sweet, but if you have a starch in your mouth, let's just say it's bread, and it has no sugar in it, it's just bread, and then you push it up against the roof of your mouth and you just hold it there for a period of time, you're going to start to notice it will turn sweet. And it's not by accident. It's because it acts just like a simple carbohydrate, which turns to sugar that the body then digests rapidly. And that's what's happening with this white rice. Simple carbohydrates rapidly convert into glucose, which leads to more glucose in the bloodstream the body can use. This causes a sudden spike in the blood sugar and is the primary reason why white rice is now linked to diabetes. To investigate the link between white rice and diabetes, researchers chose some participants who consume more than 150 grams, around a cup of cooked rice in a day. They found a clear link between eating white rice and diabetes. The highest risk was in South Asia, as we mentioned. Previous studies highlighted a link between rice and a prevalent, previously undiagnosed diabetes. This study now reports a link between the rice and an incidence of new diabetes cases. More than 6,000 individuals in this cohort developed incident diabetes during that 10-year period. Remember, they looked at these people for 10 years. So really interesting. And I remember when I was in the paleo community, they used to brag about eating this thing called safe starches. Safe. What they meant was it was safe from toxins as compared to some other carbohydrate sources. But I always brought it back to, but what about the blood sugar and insulin effects? What about it raising your blood sugar? And they just dismissed me like I was a kook. Now who's the kook? now we have research that says, oh yeah, white rice, it may not taste sweet on the tongue, but it sure is adding lots and lots of sugar to your body. Let's get to the next one here. This one's in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And the title of this one, The Clinical Effects of a Carbohydrate-Reduced High-Protein Diet on Glycemic Variability in Metformin-Treated Patients with Type 2 Diabetes. This is another randomized controlled trial. High glycemic variability is associated with late complications in type 2 diabetes. We hypothesize that a carbohydrate-reduced high-protein diet would reduce this high glycemic variability acutely in patients with type 2 diabetes as compared with the conventional diabetes diet. So we know the conventional diabetes diet is low fat and high legumes, grains, blah, 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 blah. So it was a controlled randomized crossover study, 16 patients taking metformin, so that's probably the most famous drug that any type 2 diabetic and even a lot of insulin resistant people go on because it is quite effective for insulin control modulation for people with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. The average age of the person in the study, 64. Their A1C, 47. That can't be right. 47. Because usually A1C is measured in like something point something. So mine's 4.9. Someone with very bad diabetes could be like 13.6. That's extremely off the charts. I'm not sure what 47 is. That's the millimole. So if somebody wants to do that translation for me, what is 47 millimole for A1C? Translate it into the numbers that we use. That one doesn't make sense. Duration of type 2 diabetes, they had on average 5.5 years they've been diabetic. So they were assigned to an energy matched high protein carbohydrate diet, carbohydrate reduced diet, as well as the conventional diabetes diet. So let's see how they define those. So the carbohydrate reduced high protein diet was okay, so man, they're all over the board here. All right, so I see what they did. So the carbohydrate was 31% of energy for the reduced carb. That's still too high to me. The diabetes diet was 54. Protein, they wanted you in the higher protein diet to have 29% protein, 16% in the diabetes diet, and then fat, 40% in the high protein one, and then 30% in the diabetes diet. So what they did was 2 separate 48-hour intervention periods. They looked at, they had a CGM on, so they had that little thing on their arm, and they performed to accept the glycemic variability. So what were the results? All indices of glycemic variability were significantly reduced on the controlled carbohydrate high protein diet compared with the standard diabetes diet. And it improved the glucose profile by reducing 24-hour mean sensor glucose. So they concluded in the type 2 diabetes patients treated with diet and metformin, 2 days of the same energy replacement of dietary carbohydrates by protein and fat, reduced their glycemic variability, check this out, 36 to 45%. So their glucose levels improved almost by half, a third to half, simply by reducing carbohydrates and eating more protein. These data may support that we should reduce carbohydrates as a dietary intervention for type 2 diabetes. Now, you guys might think, well, duh, we know that. But you'd be surprised. I actually had somebody get on Instagram just this morning. I had a cordial conversation with him, but I had posted something about a meme that was out there that said, if you eat these carbs, they're going to lead to chronic disease, but if you eat these carbs, they're going to make you healthy. And so the one carb showed all the junk food stuff, fast food, Coca-Cola, all that. The other side was all fruit. And so I made the point in there that context matters. If you have type 2 diabetes, you have insulin resistance, those carbs aren't nearly as healthy as you think they are, even the real whole food fruits. So this guy got on there, oh, I beg to differ because you can eat a high carb diet and improve your insulin resistance. And I'm going, in what world does that happen? And it turns out he was a vegan, but context does matter. And so it's interesting. We have yet another study that shows that the context of reducing carbohydrates when you have type 2 diabetes can definitely be